exclusively on ESPN Plus. UFC 313, Saturday. Reigning light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira defends his title against number one contender Magomed Ankalaev. And an explosive lightweight bout between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev. UFC 313, Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Buy it on ESPNplus.com/PPV.
Hi, Deesha.
Hey, Dawnie.
And welcome, everyone, to Ursa Short Fiction, the podcast where we geek out on our favorite short stories. I'm Dawnie Walton, author of the final revival of Opal and Nev.
And I'm Deesha Philyaw, author of The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. As always, this show is produced with support from you. Become an Ursa member today by going to ursastory.com/join. You'll get exclusive bonus episodes and you'll help fund future stories and conversations.
Today, we're excited to share a new audio story. This one is titled Bitch Baby, written by Halle Hill. It was published in Oxford American in 2020 and featured in Hill's 2023 debut story collection, Good Women. Deesha, here's what you said about Halle's collection. In Halle Hill's Good Women, we meet mothers and daughters, lovers and friends, saints and ain'ts, all longing for something, someplace, someone. They are curious, messy, and determined, and Hill's fierce and dazzling pen lets us feel every ounce of their complicated desires, every mistake, every realization, every triumph, every tragedy. This is a fantastic firecracker of a collection I'll return to again and again.
That is right. In this particular story that we're talking about today, Bitch Baby, our narrator is Celine, whose brother Reggie has been beaten by police. Reggie is gay, and though it is not a well-kept secret, their mother is in quiet denial about the lives that both of her children lead and the secrets they keep. Reggie and Celine work for a local woman doing house cleaning, and the money they earn also goes to financing their frequent trips to Savannah, where Reggie is in a relationship with a married doctor. Levels. Listen, levels.
Sounds good and juicy.
Exactly. And you know what? I should add that Reggie and Celine are working for a white woman doing house cleaning. And so there's some, there are racial dynamics that are at play there as well as in other parts of the story. It's one of those where it opens with a bang in a way, and then we get backstory, and then we come back to the beginning. It's visceral. I had a visceral reaction to the opening to this story. Once you start it, you can't stop. You can't. Halle just grabs you with the opening scene, and you want to follow Reggie and Celine to see how they got there in that moment and who they are.
Fantastic. And a little more about the writer. Halle Hill's Good Women was named a 2023 Best Book of the Year by Kirkus Reviews, O Magazine, Electric Literature, Book Riot, and Southwest Review. She is the winner of the 2020 Crystal Wilkinson Creative Writing Prize and the 2020 Oxford American Debut Fiction Prize. Her short stories have been translated into French and published in Joyland, New Limestone Review, the Oxford American, and now Ursa Short Fiction. She was born and raised in East Tennessee, and she currently lives, works, and teaches in North Carolina.
Be sure to stick around after the story to hear from Halle in her own words. And now, without further ado, here's Bitch Baby.
Ursa Short Fiction is proud to present Bitch Baby, a story written by Halle Hill, performed by Nytia Nikole. The story was originally published in Oxford American 2020 and is featured in the story collection Good Women, published in 2023 by Hub City Press. This story is presented with limited commercial interruption, thanks to the readers and listeners who support Ursa. Become an Ursa member today by subscribing to Apple Podcasts or by going to ursastory.com/join. You'll get exclusive episodes and you can listen right in your favorite podcast app. And now, here's Bitch Baby. Nobody talks about it, really. I couldn't wipe the blood up fast enough. Some of it still stained the seats of my car. It felt dry and gel brown in my hands. I tried to help Reggie the best I could to keep his head upright so he wouldn't choke to death. He was gurgling in the street while I pulled his slumped body into the passenger seat. I was afraid to move too fast. I was afraid the car would come back. I didn't know yet that Reggie couldn't see. At the hospital, it took a while for anyone to tend to him. They packed the gash on his skull, the one on his forehead too, to stop the bleeding while he screamed on the gurney, floating in and out. We thought it was hysterics, him saying over and over again that he couldn't see. He couldn't see. Mama was there and rocked over him and prayed the best she could, even though she knew why Reggie was going down to Savannah in the first place. To do those sweet things. I know that Mama would never say it, but she felt like it happened because of his sin. "We are the company we keep," she'd say to us all the time, giving us a penny if we could recite the scripture right. "He who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. What happens to you is a result of what you've done before, who you really are, who you know, what you do when no one's watching." She'd say this in some version for every which way we went, in the pews before service, in the kitchen with sweat beads on her forehead, biting her nails to the quick as we walked through the aisles of the Piggly Wiggly. "Who are you?" said Mama in my head. And who am I? I wondered. When we were little, Mama worked a lot and couldn't always watch us, but somehow she always felt present, and so did God, both watching us deeply and knowing who we really were in the heart. It wasn't too hard to keep Reggie's secret, mostly because there wasn't one to keep. Reggie switched too much and smacked his gum too loud and looked in the mirror too long. People knew before he did. One time I found him in Mama's bathroom shirtless and rubbing red lipstick on his full mouth. Chet Baker was on the radio, and the room smelled like cigarettes. And I watched him from the doorframe, because he was beautiful, and his lips were full enough to carry the color well. I loved the way that Reggie looked at himself when he caught his body moving, the slick, taut lines of his chest and shoulders, the grace of him, the full moon of his face. Reggie and I would lay on the floor of my bedroom while we flipped through the copies of Southern Woman and Vogue we stole from the white lady Claudine's house. "Celine, just so you know, when I move over there, I'm going to marry the doctor, and my house will look just like this," Reggie said while he flipped through the glossy pictures of the cottages. I wanted to ask him if he would have a room for me, but mostly I just listened to him and wondered if he would make it out there apart from me in the big world. Would he love it, or would he end up like all the others, stripped naked, black and blue, and hung from a tree? When we cleaned Claudine's house, sometimes she didn't really hate us as much. Her dementia made her less like a slave master, more sweet. Sometimes there would be snacks left out for us in the kitchen with a Bible note, a slice or two of chocolate chess pie on a napkin atop paper plates, never the good china, oil leaking off the paper towel, pooling around the edges. If we wanted water, we'd have to grab some from the spigot out back, but Claudine was sure to leave a glass out for us. When Claudine was out at her bridge appointments, me and Reggie would play in her things, smothering ourselves in bath oils and sprays of Chanel No. 5 and long strings of her oriental pearls. We would prance around the foyer and watch ourselves in the windows, taking turns coming down the staircase. Claudine's daughter, Mabel, was nothing but hateful. She was short and thin like a bird, except for a sliver of fat that stayed around her midsection. Mabel thought it was better for us to be separate from the people we served. She was always pulling her mother to the side, reminding her to let us use the outside bathroom and only let us drink water at the house if we brought our own cups. Mabel was convinced that we would steal things someday, so she set us up often. Something was always a tick off, the silver double-polished and left close to the door, an emerald ring left on the sink, $100 casually splayed across the bedspread, the same pearls we played in dangling off the bedpost. But we never took the bait. We just wanted the magazines. We just wanted to make pretend. One night that summer, we slept over at Claudine's house to watch it and her grandbabies, Mabel's daughters, who were twins. Harriet and her sister Debbie were loose things, both with grown women breasts at 16 and green, sad eyes. Just enough woman to get them in trouble. When Claudine would leave for the Tennessee mountains in the summer, older boys would come pick them up after me and Reggie did their makeup and played with their hair. Each strand smelled like shampoo 2 times over. When we were finished dolling them up, we would walk the girls out to the Continental that was waiting for them. Harriet and Debbie would pull out bottles of schnapps as they left the driveway, and we would watch them wave goodbye until they were a blip in our sight. When they made it back home, which they always did, we would mend them up, combing back their dampened hair and walking them to the bathroom, fanning their pink faces as they threw up between sobs. Vomit spewed out of them, smelling like sour peaches. But what else was there to do? There was no sense in warning them. White women will do anything when they want to be in love. Sometimes when the girls were passed out drunk, back at the house we would lay them in their beds, then take the money out of their pocketbooks and save it for our big trips down to Savannah. "We're just charging our babysitting fee," Reggie would say while he smiled, flashing his teeth. The tips of the enamel were still little from his first years of life. His front baby teeth never fell out. When the week came back around and Claudine drove back up to the house, the sisters would be all smiles and back in their goodness. They would have us clean their plates. "Can you put these in the sink?" And when we took them up, they wouldn't look us in the eye. But the house cleaning money was good and the time together was better, and Reggie needed a job to keep up. He was in love with Dr. Johnson in town, who was married. Dr. Johnson liked that Reggie would dress up in women's clothes, padded bra and everything, and meet him at Pinky's downtown. It's not that he wanted to be a woman, he would tell me, but he just liked looking like one sometimes. And Reggie liked to spend the house cleaning money on big tubes of Chanel lipstick. He liked the feeling of velvet all over his lips and how the doctor seemed to really need him, as if he was really something special, as if he was worth looking at. We had big plans that night. While we cleaned the floorboards with old rags and Leigh, we kept watching the clock in the living room for 8 p.m. It was hot and sticky, late July when we left Claudine's. I told Reggie to drop me off so I could get ready and get the reefer I kept under my bed. I usually met up with Victor when we went to Savannah. He was a nice enough guy who was in the service and always offered to buy me drinks. We liked to smoke in his car and dance, while Reggie went off with the doctor at the hotel for the evening. I rushed into the house to get my things, hoping to slip past Mama, who I knew was up. Her room was at the very back of the hallway. She was a night person, perpetually restless, walking back and forth, pacing around her twin-size bed over nothing and everything, all the time. I lingered in the hallway for a moment to see if she would say anything. I thought I heard her speak up, but she didn't. I went into my room and pulled on my nice black dress and reached under my bed in the little box where I kept all the things I shouldn't have. I put my hair up high on my head and sprayed on a little bit of Shalimar perfume and rushed out the door. I tried to slip out and say nothing until I heard her clear her throat. I stopped. "I'll be back later, Mama. I left something at Claudine's." She waited a while until she said, "Okay, love," with a drop of sadness in her voice. I paused again. "I'll make sure Reggie gets home fine, okay?" She let out a sigh. "Thank you, Celine. I'm so glad he has you looking after him." Earlier at Claudine's, Reggie pulled me aside and showed me a new dress he had stuffed down in his cleaning bag. He got the dress from the consignment store. It was silver and beaded and shimmered at the bottom. He smiled as he laid it across his torso and bounced around. I hadn't seen him like this in a while. It was nice to see him giddy. He told me he would pick me up at the streetlight around 9 that evening, and then we would be off to Pinky's. Reggie and the doctor were going places. The doctor pumped his head full of European dreams. He told Reggie about France and how people like him could live freely. Reggie swore one day they'd move. The doctor would leave his wife and baby, and Reggie would leave me, and they would start over together. That night when Reggie came to get me, he was feeling bold. Under his jacket, he was already wearing that dress. It glittered all over him. His hair was fresh with a perm and slicked over to the side, and he was grinning, the tips of his baby teeth showing. Reggie put the windows down, and I hopped in and started rolling. I lit the papers and let the car glow red. I passed him the blunt. It was going fine until we swerved a little. The cop had started following us some time back, and it made Reggie nervous. He drove slowly, deliberately. "Fucking pigs," he sighed. Reggie chewed on his knuckle and tapped his foot. He reached out to turn the dial on the radio, and the car dipped to the left. Then the lights came on. It all happened so quickly. The stop, the pull, the baton, the crack, the blood, the gurgling. My brother's body laid on the road, gashes all over, and I watched the cop stomp the crown of his scalp, then the back of his head. Reggie screamed and screamed, then stopped altogether. I ran to Reggie. I howled, holding him and rocking him. The officer spit in front of me. "Leave it and drive on," he said, "unless you want to turn too." I tried to pat Reggie's face to get him to wake up, but I couldn't make him stay conscious. The blood was running all down his face and in his mouth. He started throwing up blood and bile and teeth. He muttered over and over again, "I can't see, silly. Why can't I see?" When the cop car was far enough away, I pulled him into the passenger side of our sedan and wiped the blood from around his mouth and eyes. I screamed. His eyes were going in every direction. I drove to the hospital with blood on my good clothes. When we got him on the gurney, he passed out. I found a nurse and asked her for a phone to call who we needed most. Mama rushed there. When she saw him unconscious and bloodied, shining in his silver dress, she didn't cry. She just reached out to hold his hand and shook her head. A few weeks after the accident, Reggie turned 23, and Miss Claudine and Mabel came to visit at the hospital. They brought Reggie chicken salad and flowers, a balloon, and a few magazines. After some time, he was finally able to sit upright and eat and talk. Most of his front teeth were missing, and the doctors gave him special tinted glasses to keep over his eyes. When Claudine and Mabel walked in the room, they took pity on my brother. Mabel set the gifts in front of him and patted his hand with her gloved one. "Reggie, I'm just so sorry to hear about your accident," Claudine cooed, while Mabel grimaced, nodding. "How are you feeling, dear?" Claudine continued. "You want to see what they did to me?" Reggie asked. Before they could answer, he took his glasses off, and his eyes splayed to the side. His pupils turned lazy and went opposite one another. The room fell silent while we all stared at Reggie. Eventually, I asked everyone to leave and said my brother needed rest. When Reggie was on his pain medication, he kept asking if the doctor was coming to get him. So I started saying, "Soon." Reggie would ask me every morning, "Is he coming today?" And I would always answer, "Soon, Reggie. I promise. Soon." One day before he was discharged, he called me over to his bed and gripped my arm harder than he ever had. He took his glasses off and turned his face to me, his eyes floating all around. "I need you to tell me, Celine. Am I still beautiful? Do I look like I can see?" I held his face and gave him a soft grin. I could see the pink of his mouth between his broken teeth. All the little ones were gone now. I brushed some sleep off his face. I looked at Reggie as hard as I could and tried to imagine my brother before it all got beaten out of him. My words got caught in my mouth, but I pushed them through anyway. He searched my face, waiting for an answer. "Reggie, you are still the most beautiful thing." His eyes looped around in his sockets. He smiled at me. And if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't even know from looking at you that anything was wrong.
My name is Halle Hill. I'm the author of Bitch Baby, from Good Women's Stories from Hub City Press. So the story is really about two siblings and their love for each other and the limits of love. And it's a grief story. It's a little bit of a God story. I think it's a story about
protection and looking for love in the wrong places. But I think it's really about like an unbreakable bond between a brother and a sister and a love regardless of circumstance. The rest of the collection features 12 stories of Black women and their families and their lives, mostly in Appalachia and the Deep South. This story feels fairly significant because it was my first publication ever. And it was the first story where I think I felt an emotional tone for what the collection could be. I think it's the story that probably has connected with readers the most. Everyone always wishes there was a novel after Bitch Baby, and that's like really special to hear as a writer. Where did it begin? Gosh, I wrote this story, like the first bits of this story in graduate school in a fiction workshop, and I really liked it. It felt like I was finally finding a sense of voice and a sense of like topics I wanted to explore. And I felt like it was one of the first stories I wrote in a workshop where I had approached an edge, which was exciting. And so I knew I wanted to keep going with it. I've always been interested in religion as well and those kind of psychosocial dynamics. So I'm always writing about that in my fiction and how that may interact with queerness and Black identity. All those things are interesting to me. So that's where the story began. And after some revision, I finally was able to find the ways that the pieces needed to fit together. And then a really awful, I don't know if irony is the right word, but unfortunate series of events is after I wrote this story, a couple of years later, kind of was when there just seemed to be such a uptick in racial violence that we were seeing on TV and in the media. It's always been there, but more people were paying attention. And so it was maybe the right time for that story to come out. A lot of people will ask me, like, did you write it in response? And I think the worst part is I wrote it before, and that feels like devastatingly worse. I think that the patterns are just so ingrained in me, maybe personally, meaning that I don't believe that I exist as a person on my own. I know that I'm connected to generations and generations of people, for me, especially women, and like that gives a sense of meaning to me. And I see so much in the writing world, everyone's, wanting to do something new or be divisive, or, individualism is really important. Of course it's important to me too, right? Like I want to stand on my own, but I can't be a fool and think like all of this is just me. Like I'm carrying a lot. I look in the mirror and I see a lot of faces of people I used to know, or that I never knew, that I've just seen in photographs. And that's pretty powerful. I know that sounds cheesy, but I don't know what else to say. That's the truth. So I'm always thinking about that. And I think for these short stories, because you kind of have to make an agreement with yourself and the reader where you think like, I need a lot of texture, I need something interesting, but I have to get in and get out really quickly. And I found that those family lines gives something to chew on, some substance, even when, you're writing the story. I always think when you're writing a short story, it's kind of like when you're catching up with someone and you don't really have their full attention. So it's like, I'm on borrowed time anyway, but I know this one thing and I'm going to say it in a way and like I'm going to hook you and then you're going to listen and then a week later you're going to really hear what I said, And that's what I'm always thinking. So I'm always thinking about who I come from, and I'm always trying to write about family lines in the work. I think I always will be writing about that. I think the themes in this story, of course, sibling dynamics, gender, and motherhood. There's a lot of different ways that people are being mothered and being taken care of. Class, of course, race. I think the main thing that I was exploring in this story is beauty. That's the main part of this, the danger of beauty, others' inability to see beauty, how beauty can become a fetish very quickly, and like beauty beyond the physical. I really think that this is a story about beauty. And Reggie is in my mind, just like this strikingly gorgeous, unbelievably like otherworldly human being, and navigating his beauty and I don't know, like love and beauty. I think that's a lot of what this story is about. What were the challenges? I mean, writing this story hurt my feelings, you know? I don't know if I want to say that, but it's the truth. No, writing this story was hard because it's like, it's the truth, you know, like what else is there to say? And if any person in my book just like lives the most like vibrantly, it's Reggie, you know, like he's the star of the whole book, I think. It wasn't terribly hard to write it because I've already been uncomfortable with this stuff for my whole life, you know, since I probably came out the womb. But the worst part was maybe people's surprise. I got a lot of emails from people saying things like, I didn't know things could be this bad. Just statements like that. Like, I'm so sorry to hear that. I just learned a lot about some people really don't have like that distress tolerance ability to sit with something that's uncomfortable. And so like, what do you do with that? It's not my responsibility to help you through that. And I don't know why you're surprised, but here we are. I guess I just learned like it takes a minute. Like you can have a few really, I knew when I first wrote this story, I had a few really good sections and some kind of whacked pieces, but there were some things that were really singing on the page for me. And you write that, you take some time off, you come back, and like piece by piece, you can make a story that you are proud of. It may take years. It took years to write this story. I think that's the main thing. Like you write a little bit, you think on it, you write a little bit, you change, and then you get something. And I think the other thing I learned is like for me, and with this book and with this story, you have to give something to get something back on the page. And that doesn't have to mean like complete devastating vulnerability, but you have to be willing to offer something up to get that reward back and ask yourself some tough questions and put yourself up against a wall in a way that maybe feels safe. And, you know, everyone has their own thresholds for that, but there has to be some risk, something that, you know, is going to hit you a little closer to home, I think. And so learning how to find that, I think gave me this book. And I think I'm very grateful for that. I saw this really interesting interview that Kimberly King Parsons did for the Creative Independent. And she talked about sitting and waiting, and like when the page isn't opening up or something in life when she has a big answer, she just sits back and is like, the answers will reveal themselves. I actually think she might be right about that. The oldest story in this book took me 6-7 years to write, and it just takes a minute. So sit down somewhere and give it a minute. I mean, that's what I really think. I don't have anything profound to say, just that it takes time and you're going to change your mind a lot. If you're not prolific, you're not prolific. And you got to accept that I am not. So when I try to be, I don't write good things.
Bitch Baby was written by Halle Hill and performed by Nytia Nikole. Associate producers are Marina Leigh and Ashanta Jackson. Special thanks to Clavis Natera. Ursa executive producers are Dawnie Walton, Deesha Philyaw, and Mark Armstrong. To support our work, become an Ursa member by going to ursastory.com/join. You'll help us fund more episodes and stories from some of today's most thrilling writers. Thank you for listening.